I'm Sarah from Upcoming. A pleasure to have you here with us in London for the Film Festival. Maybe you could start with an introduction. Tell us a bit about your film and what audiences can expect when they watch it.
So my name's Debbie Hannan and I'm the director and co-writer of Mohart's KYRA Forever, which is a short film showing as a part of a slate of 4 called For Love by Film 4 and 104 Films. And it's a slate of 4 films by disabled and neurodivergent talent, which is really exciting. And our film with co-writer Matilda Binney is a queer rom-com set in a high school. It's about character Mo, who is a charismatic, brilliant, interesting and extremely shy young woman who has a crush on her classmate who is a TikTok disability influencer and is very, very beautiful. And is the Leavers dance, so it's her final chance to tell her how she feels. So it takes place all at the Leavers dance. It's got lots of sequins, lots of pop music. It's got lots of disabled talent on and off screen, but isn't about disability. It's about having a crush. And yeah, it's a good, entertaining comedy.
And tell us, where did you get the idea for this amazing story?
So I'm actually mostly from theatre. I'm a theatre director for about 15 years and I've started to move into screen. And Matilda Binney, the co-writer, is a playwright and I directed her first play that was on at the Bunker Theatre. And from there, which was about 4 years ago in pandemic time, we've worked together on and off, and for this we wanted to co-conceive an idea together. And as 2 elder queer millennials, we were like, what's the film we wish we'd seen that had the representation that we missed when we were younger? And we also wanted to kind of do a bit of a love letter to Gen Z, and who are so embracing of everyone, like the whole alphabet LGBT plus is in there and loved as part of Gen Z. And so we wrote the film we wish we'd seen, where the tone isn't about suffering or trauma or queer trauma or disabled life as something that's full of like pain all the time, but actually is about warmth and joy and having queer peers and queer elders that can see you through to being your fullest self.
What were some of the highlights and also the challenges along the way of making the film?
Such a good question. I mean, I think the highlight of the film was the set, as in like the people on set and the atmosphere. You know, we had so much disabled talent on and off screen and every kind of human being there. You know, at one point we had 3 sign language interpreters, we had 5 wheelchair users on set, we had a multitude of invisible disabilities, and often the screen world thinks that's not possible, or everything seems so stuck in its ways that we can't stretch or change to be more inclusive. And it just felt at one point on set, I was like, this is proof. Like, we had a creative, joyful, warm atmosphere. We got through everything we needed with flair added, and we had interesting creative characters at the heart of that, all with a majority of disabled people, and it felt like proof that this is what it is. And I think that's what this slate of 4 shorts does. It shows that disabled talent is not only, you know, necessary and we need it for representation, but actually it's creative, it's sexy, it's interesting, it's offering a fresh take and a fresh visual style. So that's probably the highlight. I think the challenges were probably things like trying to just make sure that we got the comedy right. So kind of the same as any other comedy. Like, comedy's hard, you know? I've done a lot of comedies and a lot of things that are in no way comedic, and I think comedy is harder, and that's the thing that no one discusses. Everyone thinks drama is like really, really difficult, but I find it, you know, it's easier to make an audience cry than it is to make an audience laugh on the right beat. So yeah, one of the good challenges was getting that right in the edit and working with our first editor, Sabine, on getting like frame by frame how you land a laugh.
What do you hope people will take away from watching the film? And I guess, like you say, we want people to laugh, be wrapped up in the romance, but is it also really important? I think that seems to come up in a lot of conversations lately. You know, there was almost like this wave of, you know, increasing representation on screen, but like you say, always focusing in on that, it being kind of the theme, the topic, as opposed to it actually just being a film about story, and it just so happens that that character has this, that or the other.
I think there's just so much power in remembering that people who are queer, disabled, or indeed any identity that we can name are just going about their life, living life, and like having friends and stories and lovers and griefs and sad moments and jobs and doing all the things that are part of life and the richness of that. And I think we needed that wave of representation that put it at the heart. I'm not in denial about that at all. I think was necessary, is necessary still, actually. But surely the next step is to show what life really is like. Like our film looks like if you walked into a London school. And that's what life does look like. It looks like every type of human in a room and all types of temperaments. And it's about having a crush on someone. And isn't that so exciting and fresh and true to show that every intersection of identity has every possible range of story in it as well? You too can be in a kind of sequin-covered poppy rom-com and have your story told there. And I think there's a real revolution in that that's really exciting to go, actually, we're not just in the parameters of the story that maybe a certain, the way a commissioner might look for something or the way that you program something. It's not just that, it's everything else too.
Do you think it's also interesting, whether you're millennial, whether you're an older generation? I mean, this whole thing about the woke culture debates, culture war rather, and actually when you look and speak to the younger generations, they don't bat an eyelid. And so you realise that obviously the older generations are perhaps stuck in their ways a bit and kind of bewildered by the way things are changing. But that's also true of every crossover of generations. So do we need to almost just let go a lot of this stuff?
Definitely. I mean, I'm so inspired by younger generations. I also read the other day about how, like, in ancient Egypt, when they first made paper, there's like some hieroglyphs that are like, oh, we can't let the young people use the paper because they'll just stay in all day writing on paper. And I was like, so literally since the ancient world, older generations have worried about what the younger people are doing. But I think, like, I want to keep, we want to keep the world moving. Like, time only goes forward, life only moves forward. What does that look like? Even the way that, like, young people are rearranging the idea of family and relationships and polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, even that's a revolution that's moving us forward. And I think there's something so exciting about every possible shift into embracing liberation and, like, people's full self. That's what it feels like to me, as a form of freedom. And there's always something to be taken from younger generations who don't ascribe to binaries or, to me, the most dangerous sentence is, like, we've always done it this way. I'm like, and? Like, this is all made up. And also, when you're making fiction, it's quite literally all made up. So surely as storytellers, makers, creative people, we can offer different ways to be, different types of empathy, different lives, and seeking out difference actively and kind of reveling in it and enjoying it and seeing what more life can be, rather than potentially the culture war thing that narrows down life, like really puts limitations around what is, should, and what is considered okay and what is considered the right thing to be doing. Like, all of that is kind of made up. So I'm really up for a generation that likes to make up their own way.
And what does it mean to you to have your film here as part of London Film Festival?
I think it's an amazing thing to have 4 short films that have focused on having disabled and neurodivergent talent at its core at LFF, and to have sold out NFT1. Like, that's incredible that there's an audience there, not only from our communities, the disabled, the queer communities, all of that, but beyond that as well. And I think it's proof that there's audiences, and we're at a really exciting wave of, like, disabled talent, things like Jack Thorne's, underlying health condition, access coordinators scaling up, coming and joining us on sets. And it just feels like confirmation of that. It makes me think, if our films are here this year, getting their audiences, getting their exposure, getting that talent out there, what's going to be here next year? What's going to be here in 5 years? So I'm hoping it's a seed that kind of grows into a forest.
And what's next for you? Obviously, I assume you're continuing your work in theatre, but are you going to also continue your foray into film? Have you got a feature perhaps percolating?
I'm currently writing my first feature, which I'm absolutely loving. It's the best thing and the most terrifying thing I've ever done. And I've done lots of live theatre, so that's saying something. I'm also co-writing a TV show with Nesta Muti, amazing screenwriter, about a positive sci-fi future where things work out. I know it's truly subversive and radical. So yeah, diving much more into screen for me, I think that the reach that you get with the audience and the creativity is really exciting. And to be honest, everything I bring from theatre still makes sense. You're working with story, you're working with actors, and I've had the absolute privilege of developing a style in theatre for about 15 years, and I know what my visual style is, I know the stories I want to tell. And I genuinely think for all artists, that's your bread and butter. Like, what is your identity? What are you bringing to the table? So lots of screenwriting with a theatrical twist at the moment.
Do you think the theatre world is as progressive or more progressive than cinema, or it's just such a different? It's kind of hard to compare the mediums.
I think, from my experience, theatre is always about the live conversation right now. Like really, really like the moment, you know, like it's so present. And I found that the conversations in theatre are really alive and dynamic when it comes to identities and diversity. So things like, how do you embrace neurodivergence? What does it mean when like 1 in 5 working age people in the UK have a disability, and you can have a cast of 10 and no one is disabled? Like, that's not lacking diversity, that's erasure. That's getting rid of, deleting people. And I feel like you can have those conversations in theatre and they'll be welcomed in a different way, where screen is still actually kind of slightly catching up with that. I remember the first time I went on set on a TV show and I commented to someone, oh, it's weird there's no one that's like visibly disabled, maybe invisible, you know, don't want to assume. And the person I spoke to was like, oh yeah, I've never thought about that. And I thought that's the difference. Like, theatre does think about that, and screen, however, is starting to think about that. But of course, there's so many other things that are different about both of them, where, you know, like the Black British talent in film is just unreal, and on TV. And I think theatre has that, starts a lot of those careers, but doesn't necessarily sustain them. And I think the same, like this year at LFF, I've seen so many British South Asian filmmakers that have just done amazing, like fantastical, form-breaking work. And I think that's a smaller percentage in theatre. And for me, I'm from a working class background, so I'm always like seeking out stories that reflect that. And theatre is ultimately just very middle class and very upper middle class. And film, I think actually there's a greater breadth of people from different class backgrounds. So actually maybe it's just, they've got a lot to learn from each other.
Well, I was just thinking of Scrapper with Charlotte Reagan and Molly Manning Walker's Hard to Have Sex.
Brilliant.
And, you know, there is kind of this, you know, or After Sun, you know, this kind of chatter saying, you know what, that is starting to shift, but that has taken a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, and actually, you know, that wave that we're seeing now of the incredible people that you've just named, I think there's a lot of female filmmakers, particularly in there, that's been simmering and boiling for like 5 to 10 years before that. You know, that's how long it takes for that stuff to start to show up. And but I do think it's really exciting. I think, you know, Britain's always reckoning with its class relationship and like who's allowed to tell what story, and even if you are allowed to tell it, what tropes are you allowed to tell it in, what style are you allowed to be not realistic and not naturalistic, are you allowed to go absurd or fantasy, you know? And I think this current wave of filmmakers is proving that the stories have range. Like, there's so much in there, there's so many styles to be found. Thinking about Horde that was on as well. There's so many complex emotional narratives for us to get out there. And yeah, I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be making film in the UK. The independent sector is showing us like all the potential that we knew was there is coming through, and those stories are getting told.
Thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Really enjoyed presenting your short film, and best of luck with your feature projects too.
Thank you.
Thanks.